The Cabinet has asked me to announce that in order to support the Eid al-Fitr celebrations, Eid al-Fitr taking place on June the 26th, 2015, the Cabinet has authorized funding support to 15 organizations in the amount of $2,120,000, and the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago takes the opportunity to wish the members of the Muslim faith who are now in their fasting season a very good fasting season, very holy season, and we take this opportunity to say to the country that we continue to support the celebrations and all of these religious events which contribute to the development of our multifaceted culture in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much. And just to build briefly on what Minister Gadsby-Dolly has just said, we returned from Chile yesterday and we saw some reports of it being suggested that there was no funding given for the celebration of Indian Arrival Day. That is, of course, not in fact so. And funding was given by Cabinet. But as we've said on previous occasions, part of the Cabinet's duty, and we take it very seriously under the stewardship of the Prime Minister, is in these times of little to ensure that the little we have are prioritized properly and distributed as evenly as possible. So when the country is faced, as you've been hearing now for the past 18 months, with the drop in revenue streams that we take our responsibility very seriously and ensure that what it is that we can promise does not affect those others who also need to get from the Treasury. And that has led to us reducing the amount that can be given. And it is simply because there is not the type of revenue as there was before. Yesterday, as you all know, the Honorable Prime Minister and his delegation returned from a very successful official visit to Chile. We left very early on Sunday last, the morning of Sunday last, had a very long transition period in Panama, and then transitioned on to Chile, where we got in late on Sunday evening. Very early on Monday morning, the Prime Minister led his delegation into talks with the President of Chile and members of her cabinet. And those talks were very, very successful. They were very informative. A number of issues were addressed between the President of Chile and the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and his members of cabinet. Those who accompanied him on the trip, as you know, were the Minister of Energy, Senator Franklin Khan, the Minister of Trade, Senator Paula Gopi-Schoon, the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Senator Dennis Moses, and myself as Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Minister in the Office of the Attorney General. A number of issues were raised at bilateral level between the various ministers and their colleagues, their counter-colleagues, and as well as between the Prime Minister and the President. What it has done is it has strengthened our relationship with Chile, and the fact that really we don't think was publicly known before this trip. Chile actually, they have significant LNG facilities where they regasify LNG into natural gas for Chile, and they now actually export some of that to Argentina as well. 95% of the LNG imported by Chile comes from Point Fortin in Trinidad. That is extremely significant, especially in today's current climate of the competitiveness of what is happening up north with shale gas out of North America. So we went there to strengthen this relationship, and the Prime Minister did so with the government of Chile, along with the Minister of Energy, Trade, Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. That was one of the big issues that we dealt with when we were down there. We also spoke to them about progressing the partial trade agreement between Trinidad and Tobago and Chile, where we're trying to get the importation tariffs for our exports to Chile down, and likewise we will look at what is it that Trinidad and Tobago can import from Chile. They have a very diverse economy because it's about 4,700 kilometers of coastline stretch on the Pacific. So they go from a Mediterranean type climate similar to California, for example. So there are a lot of vineyards, a lot of wine production, but also fruits, strawberries and other of those types of fruits coming from there. They're also big into meat production, beef, pork, poultry production, as well as wood and wood products. They are one of the largest producers of copper in the world. They produce other minerals. So a lot of discussion was had as to how we can promote trade between our two countries, but a big area of focus was on our energy sector, not only LNG, but also ammonia, because they import significant amounts of ammonia from Trinidad and Tobago, where we have ammonia producers in our downstream industry at Point Lisas. The Prime Minister also used the opportunity, as you would recall from him telling us at his return at Piarco yesterday, to discuss the events taking place in Venezuela, in particular what has been happening with the OAS organization. So the Prime Minister put very squarely on the table what Trinidad and Tobago's position is, and asked Chile, as a neighbor country, to be prepared and to stand by ready to assist if there's an opportunity for Venezuela to invite international mediation and persons to assist them in what is going on. But Trinidad and Tobago's position with Venezuela, which is stated very clearly, is we don't interfere in our neighbors' affairs, but we stand by ready to assist in whatever way we can. It's a democratically elected government, and if there are other ways that we can assist, as we've done with increasing the trade and trade facilities and any other ways, we stand ready to do so. The discussions at Chile also culminated in the signing of an agreement, which I signed as Minister in the Office of the Attorney General, along with the government of Chile, signed by their Minister of Foreign Affairs, for the promotion of intellectual property between our two countries. Intellectual property, of course, is an area of diversification for Trinidad and Tobago, the registering of patents and trademarks, but also when there are matters of innovation and the protection of innovation and invention. That is an area that is growing internationally and worldwide. So Trinidad and Tobago signed an agreement with Chile where we're going to allow each other an easier process for the registration of intellectual property, and discussion as how that industry can be promoted between Trinidad and Tobago and Chile. The various ministers held discussions about how they can promote trade, how we could better relations. Another area that Chile is very big on is dealing with natural disasters. So the president of Chile offered Trinidad and Tobago, because they have a number of natural disasters that have taken place over time, earthquakes, tsunamis, fires. She told us about substantive fires that have taken place and how they can offer assistance to Trinidad and Tobago and the CARICOM region for the learning of dealing with these natural disasters and just dealing with crisis in general. After our productive meeting, they hosted a luncheon where they invited members of the diplomatic corps and the business community from Chile to interact with us at a luncheon. That went very well. A number of discussions were had as to how we can strengthen the relationship. What is interesting about Chile and their economy is that it is private sector based. The state owns very little in Chile. So they were discussing with us how that works, how efficient the system is or not efficient. Another thing that Chile is known for internationally is a very efficient taxation system and the collection of tax. So we also discussed with them innovation and the establishment of further relationships with the University of Trinidad and Tobago in the renewable energy area, because they have taken a view that by next 10 to 15 years, they want to increase up to 20% of their energy needs through renewable energy. On the next day, the Prime Minister led the delegation to meet with a body called SOFACO, and this body is really a gathering of all the trade unions, the private sector, and government under one umbrella. And the Prime Minister engaged along with the rest of the members of the delegation with them at that level, which they were very, very happy for. Again, a big issue that featured and questions asked immediately by their private sector energy companies was, would Trinidad and Tobago continue to have a sustainable supply of LNG and ammonia and other downstream products to Chile? Because with the opening of the Panama Canal, what that has done is shortened by half the amount of time for shipments of ammonia and LNG to leave Trinidad and Tobago, Point Lisas and Point Fortin, and get to Santiago. And the question was asked whether that can continue, because they need to continue the sustainability of their natural gas supplies via LNG. The answer was yes, obviously. We discussed with them. They asked us about what is going on between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela and our discussions and the progress of our conversations with Venezuela for the gas, across-border gas from Dragon and other areas of initiatives, and also what is going on with ammonia and the supply of gas to our downstream industry. And the Prime Minister did give levels of comfort to them that we will continue to focus on these areas, and we expect that Trinidad and Tobago will continue to be able to supply LNG to them. Immediately after that meeting, we then drove between 2.5 to 3 hours to the port facility, the world-class port facility, where they are importing the LNG. And we toured those facilities to see how they accept the LNG cargoes from Trinidad and Tobago. A very interesting fact is, out of 299 cargoes of LNG to this facility in Chile, which is their largest regasification facility in Chile that they're about to expand, 225 of the cargoes came from Point Fortin in Trinidad. So again, discussions were had as to how important the Trinidad and Tobago LNG is for Chile, and they explained to us the process and how they're looking to expand. And we discussed with them the potential for investment by Trinidad and Tobago going forward in the future. After a very successful tour of that plant and us giving them levels of comfort and reassurance that we will continue to supply them with LNG from Point Fortin, we then drove for about an hour to close for them nearby solar panel field, about 3 to 5 hectares of solar panels that are producing 3 kilowatts of energy to a nearby town, and had discussions with them there as to the renewable energy. So we had a very successful, very intense 2 days of meetings, not only with the government of Chile, but also with their private sector. And as I pointed out, the private sector is what drives Chile's economy, and the government is really able to shepherd them and to have efficient taxation systems. The next morning, which was yesterday morning, we left the hotel at 3:15 in the morning and made our way back to Trinidad and Tobago with the promise to Chile that we will continue to progress the partial scope discussions, but as well we reached out, or rather their private sector reached out to us, and we expect there to be a visit by private sector Chile to Trinidad and Tobago in the not too distant future. And again, I use the opportunity on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to thank the government of Chile, and in particular the ambassador to Trinidad, Ambassador Schmidt, for a very, very efficient, comfortable, and well-scheduled and programmed visit for the government of Trinidad and Tobago's delegation to Chile. And we look forward to welcoming their delegation and shoring up more contractual arrangements in our energy industry, but also what other opportunities may exist for the two countries to carry out an increase in trade. We discussed tourism, we discussed the opportunity and their support for air agreement between Trinidad and Tobago and Chile. And when it is their winter period, to try and get their tourists to Trinidad to promote, and Tobago to promote our tourism products. So it was a very successful trip. And again, this government is committed to the building of relationships, because we recognize that relationships are now what are essential in attracting those investment dollars, the foreign direct investment from overseas countries. And the world has changed. So whereas before the majority of our energy products were being, and in particular LNG, were being sold to the eastern seaboard of the United States, we now have to look south to markets like Chile and other markets in Asia that may be able to take up at good prices our product. And we're also now going to be competing with the United States product for Chile. So they told us the Prime Minister's intervention was timely. A lot of emphasis was placed in Chile at the fact that our head of the executive, the Honorable Prime Minister, is the one who led the delegation. And they placed a lot of emphasis on that, and were very grateful because the Prime Minister was able to lead his ministers in the answering of discussions where there may have been concern by the Chile business community before. The Prime Minister was able to alleviate that concern and also to invite new opportunities and new investment via Chile in Trinidad and Tobago. So that is a summary of the trip that was taken by the Prime Minister and his delegation to Chile. And now I'll invite you all for some questions.
Minister, one of the things that was made at the press conference yesterday, the Prime Minister made a particularly strong statement regarding the head of the OAS, Secretary General, and whether he should stay in his post re the whole Venezuela situation. Is there a concern that we might be picking a fight that we shouldn't be doing, or possibly this might have some negative implications within the OAS for us?
Absolutely not. Trinidad and Tobago has been very, very cautious and very calculated and very definitive in its position at the OAS with respect to Venezuela. And what the Prime Minister was indicating is that it is our view that the opportunity for the OAS to have intervened and mediated in a situation was lost by a very unnecessarily aggressive stance taken by, as he put it, a public servant who became the Secretary General of the OAS. And Trinidad and Tobago is obviously within its right and its place to put that position forward. However, our participation at the OAS on this matter continues. We continue to maintain our standard, which is that we will not allow there to be the railroading of any democratically elected government, and in particular our closest neighbor. And we will participate in the sideline discussions to try and let good sense prevail in what is obviously a difficult situation taking place with our neighbor at this stage. But we don't feel that we have in any way jeopardized or upset our relationship at the OAS level.
Do you think there's a concern that Trinidad and Tobago's stance is heavily influenced by its desire to have this gas agreement concluded with Venezuela, and that we may not be entirely objective, or we may not be a dispassionate observer in this issue?
No, we don't think so. I mean, yes, the latest front issue on the table is the energy issue, and what we've been discussing with Venezuela for some time, and it is progressing very well. In fact, I can tell you all that I spoke to Minister Martinez, who's the equivalent of their Minister of Energy, when I was in Chile, and he's hoping to come across here to meet within the next couple of weeks. But the answer is no. We have always taken a position with Venezuela that we are a neighbor and we're here to support Venezuela. And even if this energy matter was not on the table, I think the history of the relations between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela is just a continuum of this supporting relationship. And at the end of the day, when President Maduro was elected, it was with a vast majority of the votes, and it was democratically done. We've seen some recent events with their National Assembly, etc. Again, that was an execution of democracy. So we in Trinidad and Tobago really take the position that we're here to support in whatever means that we can, and we are not being influenced, as you're suggesting, by any commercial desire. Obviously, gas from Venezuela is important, but as you all will find out in the next couple of hours with some announcements by BP, and then there will be future announcements by other multinationals in Trinidad and Tobago, the energy economy of Trinidad and Tobago within our borders continues to be a good one.
That being said, there was an announcement of 10% renewable energy by 2020 or 2021. You can confirm for me. It's one of the rare acknowledgements that climate change even exists by this government. What are we looking at in that 10%? Are we looking at solar, wind, hydro? We have all of the above. What is that going to look like, and how are we going to start putting measures in place?
Climate change was one of the big topics of discussion between the President of Chile and our Prime Minister, because of course they are being affected by it. Their southern border is down by the Antarctic, and they were telling us of some of the climate change effects that they're seeing. So it did come up. Chile is one of the leading countries in the world, along with Germany, in renewable energy. And that is why we put it on the agenda for us to go and see. I can tell you the government is currently looking at 3 areas: solar, wind, as well as the utilization, and we're waiting on the return of a study at the dumps. How can you use things that are taking place at the dumps for renewable energy? Those 3 areas where we really don't have the opportunity for hydro in Trinidad and Tobago. And I can tell you that the Minister of Finance and myself have had some initial discussions, and then the Minister of Energy as well, with some entities that can provide both the solar and the wind energy. And we intend to progress those conversations. It may in fact even be we use some pilot projects, which is what Chile has done. Right now, the cost factor of these types of renewable energy are more costly than our utilization of our available natural gas supplies. So when we've done the initial math, it is more expensive for us to go via the route of solar as well as wind energy. But in a desire to keep our commitment of moving towards some level of renewable energy, we continue to pursue it. And one of the conversations that came up with the persons and the experts in Chile at this solar panel field is how much the technology has bettered itself in a short period of time, and the cost of the technology has come down. So we were looking at some very, very thin solar panels and this type of thing. But we have had recent discussions as well about the utilization of wind energy.
Because it becomes more costly, we keep putting off, and then we end up at the end of the race and everybody's miles ahead.
I don't think there's an international race based on renewable energy. We have a commitment, and as I said, we are currently having those discussions. Those discussions have progressed to the point, as I've just indicated. We have begun the costing exercise of how much it will cost to go down the road of renewable energy.
How is this going to factor into the whole exercise that we are currently doing regarding reducing the fuel subsidy? Because renewable energy and the fuel subsidy, there is a...
Correct. So at this time, and with what's going on in the economy, obviously it's a mathematical equation that needs to take place, and that is what is happening. So we are exploring, one, the opportunities they are out there and the options, and then two, there will have to be a costing exercise. And when you look at what Chile has done, where they have no natural resources of their own for energy purposes, or very limited, only in the south, you see that they do it phased in over a period of time, and that is what we intend to do. And we're not being held back, or we're not losing any race, so to speak.
Minister, can you tell me if TNT will increase its supplies, LNG supply to Chile, and what will be the revenue gain from that?
Absolutely, we would like, but as I said, we're up to 95% of supplying. They did indicate to us that there are opportunities now of LNG being supplied from North America. So we took note of that, and we told them, look, you've interfaced with us, let us continue the discussions as to how we can maintain that supply, and is there any opportunity for us to increase. As I said, what was interesting is they actually built a pipeline for billions of dollars from Argentina over the Andes into Chile for Argentina to supply them with gas. And one day they woke up and Argentina turned off the gas. And now they've reached a stage where their regasification program with Trinidad and Tobago LNG, they're actually able now to export gas from Trinidad that comes in at LNG. They regasify it and send it back through that pipeline as natural gas. So we are very interested. And the continuation of those relationships that you would have last seen featured in Houston, the Prime Minister's visit to Houston with persons such as Shell and BP, are very important relationships, because ultimately they're the ones who are selling the LNG out of Atlantic LNG. So we have had those conversations. I can tell you all this morning, the Prime Minister and myself met with the executive team from BP. They're about to make some announcements with Minister Khan at 2 o'clock this afternoon, right now at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And it was a very, very good and productive meeting that we had with them.
Dr. Dolly, why do we still fund religious festivals? We have all this, we cutting back costs and all of that. We talk about, a separation between church and state. Why are we still giving money to these religious organizations for what could be seen as one day of celebration?
With respect to that question, Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Trinidad and Tobago has had a long history of this type of funding. It is looked at as a part of ensuring that our culture is preserved, and so in that vein, it is done so that the communities who celebrate the different festivals and so on can carry on the traditions and ensure that our multifaceted culture remains that way. And that is the basis of the whole issue of funding. But let me just say that in response to our reduced economic circumstances, we have had to make adjustments downward with respect to what is funded and how many groups can participate in the funding. And you would have heard a number of groups over the time come forward and express discontent with that downward adjustment. But the point is, we want to ensure that certain festivals are sustainable and sustained in our country. And as time goes by, though, we do want to say to different groups that the ability of the government to fund in the way that they were funded before is going to be definitely reduced, and therefore to all groups, and we have been saying this, there is a need to look at how we celebrate things, what we celebrate, and the extent to which we celebrate, and what is put into that celebration. There are a lot of frills that people have become accustomed to that really have to be brought down to the reality of our circumstances. And so though the government is desirous of ensuring that these celebrations happen, we really need to look at how they happen, and we have adjusted downwards. And depending on how things go, we'll continue to do so as we strive for that balance between what we need to celebrate and how it is celebrated.
There's a level of ingratitude sometimes when you're arguing out this money and then you get releases like what happened there on Tuesday, was it? With the SDMS saying that we didn't get money. And is there like some level of ingratitude that comes out there when this happens? Or entitlement?
I don't judge it as ingratitude or not. I just say it's unfortunate that certain attitudes are portrayed. Nevertheless, we will continue to do what we know we have to do in the way that we can do it.
Let's say, Ms. Hugo, can you give us an idea as to how that money was dispersed? I think there was a complaint that some organizations did not receive the money on time.
When organizations receive money, all depends on when they made a request for the money. It takes time for the request to be processed and so on, and for us to have the releases available. So it all depends on when the request was made, what releases are present at the point in time to be able to give the money. So for example, today, Cabinet would have approved the grant for Eid. Eid is June 26th. But approval of this, it has to be confirmed. Releases have to be applied for. So there is a process. So that does not in any way mean that this money is going to come today. It means that we now have approval to start the process of application. So it does take a while, and a number of the organizations are familiar with this. And either they would submit in time for this process to take place, or if they submit later than 2 months prior to the event, they know that the money would come after the event, once we are satisfied ourselves that the events did take place and so on.
When it comes 2 months after the event, is that just at this point spent money, thrown away money? Because if the money is supposed to come for Eid, and the money comes after Eid, we know what happens there. We've just given this organization money for...
There are quite a number of organizations, and the money doesn't come 2 months. We ask people to apply 2 months in advance. Many people don't apply that. If it comes after, many times they have relationships with their suppliers as well, and they understand that the money is going to come after. They are notified when the grant is approved and in the amount. And therefore, they make relationships with their suppliers so that they pay the bills and so on.
I'd just like to make a point with that ingratitude question that you asked. I think it's important that the public understands that we, the government, are really the protectors of the taxpayer. And we are here protecting the treasury for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's not a personalization as people are attempting to do with the government and with those who sit at the cabinet level. We take the decision on behalf of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. So that's a question that the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago need to be asked, and let them answer. Because in a time where there is less and the revenue is less, and the government keeps pointing this out and managing the money on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, those who make those utterances and cries, it's not against the government, it's not our money, it's the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago's money, and they are the ones to whom they will answer at the end of the day. Any other questions?
I just wanted to pick up on that particular point, Minister, because as you're aware, within recent weeks, when we're talking about the whole issue of managing expenditure, doing more with less, I mean, 2 of your own cabinet colleagues came into the line of fire on expenses they wrapped up with it directly or inadvertently. So has there been any further conversation between the Prime Minister and members of the cabinet regarding expenditure, trips, anything being done outside of TNT or within its borders?
The answer to that is yes. As I had said on a previous post-cabinet, the Prime Minister consistently talks to his cabinet and tells us about safeguarding the taxpayers and reducing expenses, etc. And subsequent to these events that you referred to taking place, the Prime Minister did have a conversation directly with the cabinet and told us that we basically need to be careful, very, very careful going forward, and that one of the areas that we need to be constantly aware of is the expenditure of money.
A question I had last week, when the finance minister was saying, seemed very confident that the government would not back down on their property tax, and saying that there was no injunction. I was very firm on that. Now there is an injunction, a firm injunction. Is the government now planning to take a step back, reevaluate everything, and then come back to the public, or are we still moving forward with appeals, etc.?
As you all are aware, this matter is now sub judice and frontally before the courts. We were given an update today at the cabinet level as to what transpired yesterday, and in fact, as I understand it, it is a new injunction, conservatory order, stay in place that was not there before. The matter is going to be appealed. The state's lawyers are in the process of settling the notice of appeal, which they will file, serve on the other side. And as a government, we will continue to do what we can to implement the law. But at this stage, because of what has transpired in the court system, we will await the outcome of what the Court of Appeal has to say. And we hope that will happen very shortly.
Might have an idea as to how soon it intends to file those notices?
We were told the notices would either be filed today or by latest tomorrow. And I understand there's a hearing before the Court of Appeal next Tuesday.
Is the government disappointed though? I mean, this seems like a fairly big blow to its role.
I don't think, again, it's a blow to the government. This government has always said that it will abide by the legal process. It respects the court system. As you heard the Prime Minister say yesterday, there are a number of concerns that I'm sure will be articulated at the right point in time. But to err on the side of caution, and what we've been advised at this stage is, let's just await the outcome of the legal process. So we're not going to be drawn into anything outside of the legal process at this time.
I have one more. Just basically, it's as we're in the legal forum, and I know the Prime Minister has mentioned about a wall between different arms of the state, but surely the government is concerned that this has some level of concern that what's transpiring within the judiciary now is basically coming down to a war between certain attorneys and the Chief Justice. Is there any...
You're talking about a different issue now, the issue that the Law Association are actively meeting at this point in time.
It just keeps getting from bad to worse. Again,
as the Prime Minister has been very, very at pains to outline, and we maintain it as the government, there are, he put it, I think, the wall of China. There are Chinese walls in between the various arms, and we respect that. Obviously, we continue to observe what's going on, just as mere citizens, but also as a government. And at the appropriate stage, if at all we need to be advised, we will be advised by the Attorney General on what's happening. Administration of justice in a growing country like ours is always something that's going to be evolving. And I think we're seeing some of the growing pains of a growing nation right now in the administration of justice, and we will just continue to observe at this stage.
The notion of this wall, this Chinese wall, at the end of the day, the administration of justice is such an important part of the fight against crime.
Correct.
But I don't know how feasible this wall can be if at the end of the day you have a situation where 53 cases are going to be heard all over again, and that is going to clog up the system and so on. So, I mean, how practical is this position of this wall? I mean, it's just...
It's a constitutional wall. I mean, the Privy Council has ruled on it from as far back as the 1970s and said that there's this concept of separation of powers. It's constitutionally that way. The parties that need to be Involved at this stage are the judiciary and the director of public prosecutions, who, as you know, is the person charged with dealing with criminal matters under the Constitution. And the government stands by, always willing to assist in whatever way it can for a more efficient administration of justice. I think what we're seeing right now, we have to wait for it to play out. We, when I say we, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, you have the Law Association involved, you have the attorneys involved, you have the judiciary involved, you have the Director of Public Prosecutions Office involved. Right now, there's no role for government in that, but we continue to observe. I mean, and even the 53 matters, I have seen different reports. Are they just paper committals? If they're paper committals, does that really mean that there was a hearing, where have the hearings reached, etc.? And at the end of the day, we just stand by waiting to see what the outcome will be. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much as usual, members of the media. Take care.